Welcome back. My most recent Rapid game on Lichess ended in a draw out of a Caro-Kann defense, but I'm pretty sure, as normally happens, that I had winning chances in that game, but gave it away. So I'm going to go through and try to see if I can figure out what I should have done instead using the same method that I've been using on chess.com, which is where I watch the analysis bar, and when there's a big jump in my opponent's favor, I stop and try to figure out what my moves should have been, and then I check the lines. And if you hear any loud noises like banging or grinding in the background, that's because my neighbor's roof is about 20 feet that way, and he has contractors up there with a bunch of power tools. It's the same contractors he's had several times over the past year, and they don't make any visible difference, so I assume he's just hiring them to stand up there and make noises with their power tools. But I could be wrong about that. If you don't hear any noises, that's because the audio software that I'm using to reduce that is doing its job, so good job to the coders. Let's take a look at this game. All right, I am just going to click through the moves, and I will speed that up in editing and then focus on the places where something went wrong. Okay, we've come up with a spot in which where I did something wrong, and it was taking this bishop. My thought process at the time was obviously that they only have two pieces that can take back. One is the queen, one is the knight. I assumed that they would take back with the knight. So after I took the bishop, they would take back with the knight. Then I would take their bishop. At that point, they could take back with the knight or the queen. And we would have traded pieces. But perhaps most importantly, I would have traded a knight for a bishop and a bishop for a bishop. So my opponent would have no bishops left, and I would have a bishop and a knight. I think the problem with that is that here my opponent is only one piece ahead in development. And when I do this, and they take back, and I take here, and they take there with their knight, they still have a piece developed, and I don't. Maybe that's the problem with it. I thought I might have had a slight advantage here by trading off the light squared bishops, because the light squared bishop is kind of a weakness in the Caro-Kann. It's you try to get it out there. That's one of the ideas of the Caro-Kann versus the French defense, is that instead of blocking in your light squared bishop, you get it out and then play the e-pawn. At least in my understanding, which is probably fairly limited. So I don't see what's so wrong about that. I don't see what the big idea is. It might be that they could take back with the queen. So what should I have done instead? Should I have just played e6 here? Because, I mean, that would have been a normal move in the Caro-Kann at this point. I still am learning this defense, and there's a different variation every time. I've played it 200 or 300 times now, and so far have not repeated the first 7 moves of the Caro-Kann defense. So that's going to be my guess, that it was either playing e6, or I guess it's possible I could have gotten a queen out here to check. The problem with that, I assume, is that they could just pull this bishop back to block. They could also block with the pawn. They could also block with the knight 2 different ways, or they could block with the queen. So, or for that matter, they could block with the other knight. So I'm going to go with e6. Let's turn on the lines and see what it says. Here it's a little harder. I can't just click a toggle up there. I have to go to the menu system and select multiple lines here and then close the menu system. My best move is to take the knight now. And my second best move, it still would not have been a blunder or a mistake, would have been playing e6. Okay, so I wasn't wrong about e6, but I might have been wrong about this. What would that have done? If I had taken there, they would have taken back, and then I would have played e6? I don't know about that. I don't know what the difference is or why that's so much better. But again, as I had just said before I clicked on the lines, I know that the light squared bishop can just be traded off at some point. But usually I try to trade it off for their light squared bishop rather than just for a knight. But that's what Stockfish says here on move 7. Okay, but I wasn't wrong with e6, so that's good. Now let's turn off the lines, 0, and we will continue and see you at the next break. Okay, well, taking the knight there was wrong, so let's back up. They took with the queen, which was one of their options. But now their queen is aiming at my bishop. So I kind of have to take it. Or should I have protected? Because just a few moves ago, it was the correct move for me to take this, but now it's a mistake. The reason I did was because I wasn't sure how to protect it. I guess I could have protected it by putting a queen here on d7. I had considered protecting it with a check, but then it's still sitting there and they just block that check with their pawn or something. Or worse yet, this pawn, which is protected by their queen, and then immediately challenges my queen, and I have to come back, and then they still get the bishop. So maybe h5? Surely it wasn't just pulling the bishop back, was it? Maybe it was. Maybe that pawn's undefended. Well, I'm going to go with one of those two. I can't decide what I should have done. Or maybe all the way back here? Surely not. Okay, I'm going to say h5 and turn on the lines. Okay, this time it is showing me 3 lines. Oh, it says to bring the bishop all the way back to d7 is my best move here. Or queen to d7, which I didn't think was great. I'm not liking that because that means that now I can't move my e-pawn later because that would cut off the protection of that bishop. Oh, it's taking queen to d7 out of it. Queen to c8. Oh, I guess that would have protected it too and aimed at that pawn. I like that one. Or knight to h6. Okay. But my opponent still would have had a +2 advantage because of my previous mistake, which I'm not really seeing right now. We're even on material. My opponent is ahead on development, but that's often the case in the Caro-Kann defense. So I'm accustomed to being behind on development. But so this is still stemming from my mistake of taking that bishop with my knight, which I thought was a good idea at the time. And still at this point in the game, didn't think was a horrible idea. Okay, so I should have just brought the bishop back here and then blocked it in like a French bishop, apparently. Okay, well, I am learning that it was not a good idea to do what I did, which was to defend this bishop by trading it off. That was not good at all. It, in fact, took me down to took my opponent to +9 at this point. And that's because they don't have to trade off the bishops. They can put me in check. And I have to block with the queen. Oh my, that's what's wrong with it. All right, and then after I block with my queen, I assumed they would take it, and then I would be in check, so I would have to take back, and then they would win my bishop. And so they would be up a full queen and still have traded off those bishops. Okay, that definitely explains why it was such a horrible move to take the knight right there. Wow, I don't think my opponent saw that. But anyway, I'm going to turn off the lines and keep going. Okay, we've reached another point at which I blundered. As you saw there, I had an advantage for some time because my opponent didn't take advantage of my blunder earlier when they could have. So I maintained an advantage for several moves. We're on move 21 now. My idea here with that knight move was that they had just threatened my bishop, and if they took it, I figured that would split their pawns. That pawn would be by itself locked in over here, and I was threatening to take their bishop. That was my plan. I thought they took mine, I'll take theirs. I guess the problem with that is it allows their rook in here to f7, which would be check. Okay, so I probably should have moved the bishop at this point. I'm going to guess it was moving the bishop to d6. So let's turn on the lines and see if that's what it was. Bishop to d4. Wanted to go forward, but wouldn't they have just put another pawn after it at that point? It says that they would. But then I would play b5, and they would take my bishop, but then I would take their knight. Wow, it wants me to trade off the bishop for that knight, and so but move it here and entice them to pull this up. Oh, well, that would leave that pawn stranded, and it would keep their rook from having access to that. Okay, but bishop to f6 was my second best move, but d6 isn't bad, as you see, minus 2.8, minus 2.8, minus 2.7. So my move wasn't bad. I said bishop to d6, that's fine. That still prevents their rook from seeing this pawn, and okay, that's fine. I'm going to turn off the lines. I did guess the right move there, and keep going. Okay, here we are at another point in which I have given away an advantage. This time I still have a very slight advantage, but right before that move, I was up -2 or so. My idea here, I think, was pretty obvious that I was planning on pushing this pawn at some point, and I wanted more than one defender on it. So I should have done something else instead that would have kept me at a -2, rather than taking us back to very close to equality. Now, I do remember that during the game, I thought right after I moved that maybe I should have done it with the other rook, and that would have left this rook free to come to the open file here on the c file. So I wonder if that's what it was, that I should have pushed this here to press this pawn forward. Or maybe I should have left the pawn where it was. This pawn is doing good work here, defending the 2 pawns in front of it. It is kind of a backward pawn, though, and in that sense, it's a weakness. It's an undefended piece. But doing this undefends, of course, those two pawns. So maybe I should have pushed one of those first, or both of those first before trying to defend that. But I'm going to guess it's one of these three moves. One of these three. And turn on the lines and see. Rook h to c8. Oh, wow. It wanted me to leave my a rook where it was and bring this h rook all the way over here to c8 behind my king. That's my top move. And now it's minus 1.8, not minus 2. It was minus 2.1 until I turned on the lines. Or king to d7, which would have protected that backward pawn, so I was right to be worried about that, I guess. Or king to d8, which what would that have done? That's my third best move. Okay, that one I don't understand at all. I understand to some degree putting a rook on an open file, although I still am not sure that I wanted to bring that one all the way over here. But apparently this one is very important. It's important that my a rook stay here. But I understand in general the idea of having a rook on an open file. h6 popped up there in the lines just a second, but then it disappeared. So I was wrong about those two moves, and I was certainly wrong about this one. But I wasn't wrong about trying to protect the backward pawn, which is a potential weakness in the position. I think if I'm moving a rook to an open file, it's going to be the a rook there because this rook then would, if I put my h rook all the way over here, that severely limits where this rook can go. I don't know if I like that. But Stockfish says that's what I should have done. So I should have recognized somehow that it was important to keep that rook over there. Okay, well, let's turn off the lines. All right, so I moved there, lost most of my advantage, and then let's find my next mistake and or blunder. All right, well, we found another one. It was pushing this pawn without having a rook behind it. As you saw earlier, I had brought this rook all the way over there, but then I had to bring it back for some reason. I brought it back because my opponent looked like they were about to push this pawn. But I guess I eventually decided that having one defender on that pawn there was enough. But it was a mistake to push that. So again, we're in the -2 range, and that took us very close to equality playing that. So what should I have done? Should I have pushed this? Should I have pushed my a pawn or put the rook behind the a pawn? Or should I have finally gotten my other rook into the game here? I don't know. I'm going to turn on the lines and see what it says. Rook to c7 is what it says. Is my best move. We're moving this rook forward one, which I guess the obvious purpose of that would be to bring the other rook behind it. Or even up to, it says, rook to c7, or back over here. But by far, c7 is the best move here, rook to c7. But you see that, the third best move is just putting that rook back in the corner, where earlier Stockfish was insistent that that's where it belonged. It should stay there in the corner and just stay there. Which kind of goes against so many opening principles, like leaving the pieces on their home squares. I have it on a semi-open file. Isn't that good? But apparently not. I mean, my best moves are to move it forward, to keep it on there. But yeah, it really does like it over in the corner. I guess doubling up the rooks here isn't, I mean, that's not a horrible idea. But it looked like I had multiple defenders on this square already because I played here. If they decided then to move that pawn forward, I could take it. And they could take back with the, I guess if they took back with the rook, I would take it and trade rooks there. And remember the e-pawn is already here, so I could continue edging it forward and bring a rook over to be behind it. Their bishop would be here, but that rook would be gone, and it would have been even trades. I'm afraid I didn't learn much from that, but playing what I played took us down to quite a bit. But it says they should have just taken, but they didn't. And I didn't think they were going to, because if they did, I would have taken here. Then I would have had an extra attacker on that pawn. Plus, I would have had this kingside majority of the pawns. I would have had one isolated pawn here, but they wouldn't have had any pawns on those three files. And my isolated pawn was, still guarding against their c pawn. So I don't know, but I'm going to turn off the lines and keep going. All right, we've arrived at another one. If we back up just a little bit, I knew or was pretty sure here that this was not a great move because I know they were going after this pawn, but I guess I could have defended the pawn, but instead I took the one that pawn used to be defended by their rook, but they blocked their defense of the rook by putting their bishop there. So I was right to take that. One of their better moves to take my pawn, but now I'm not supposed to take the rook, but they're going to take mine. So should I have just backed up one? Should I have brought the other rook over now? Okay, it's got to be one of those then. If taking the rook was wrong, which I don't understand exactly why, other than it gives them control of the open file. Maybe that's what this is about. If I bring the h-rook over now and they take, then I would have a rook here. So I'm going to guess it was either rook back to c4 or the h-rook over to c8. Let's turn on the lines and see if that's what I should have done. Oh, that's a really slight difference. You can see that, right? d4 is my best move to protect that rook there, and it advances my passed pawn. They have a passed pawn that's kind of blockaded by my king, but I now have a passed pawn that's not blockaded by anything. So I get that. I would protect the rook and advance my passed pawn. But that was my second best move, and there's not a lot of difference between them. Okay, so I don't feel too bad about that. And rook to c4 was my third best move, but that would have been even worse than what I did, which was taking the rook. Okay, that justifies what I did just a little bit. It's just that it was -1, and before I turned on the lines, it wasn't quite that close. Okay, let's turn off the lines. Yeah, see, it was more like -4. That's 1.4. Yeah, it's interesting how the lines change, or the evaluation changes depending on whether the lines are on or not. Okay, I'm going to have to pay attention to that. Okay, so I took the rook, and that wasn't horrible. Let's go on. Okay, well, that wasn't great either, apparently. I came after the bishop here, undefended bishop, because right now my king can't get any closer to that pawn or the bishop because the bishop and the pawn guard all these squares. We're kind of at a standoff here, and they're probably thinking about bringing their rook in. So maybe instead of taking the bishop, instead of coming over here to threaten the bishop, let's go back. Maybe I should have done something else. Oh, I should have taken the pawn here. I could have just taken the pawn. Oh my. Yeah, that's it, I'm sure. Let's turn on the lines. Yes. Okay. They gave me their pawn by moving that rook, which is why it was a good idea for me to take their rook. But then I just ignored the fact that they weren't defending that pawn anymore. That's so weird. I had seen when they quit defending their C pawn, but when they quit defending their B pawn, I didn't notice. Okay. Well, I got that one. Let's turn off the lines and keep going. It's kind of like a pop quiz, and I think I'm scoring about 40% on it so far, so. I'm just going to stop right here and say that it looks like from my lines here, my list of moves that's hidden just behind my camera view, that I did not take the rook. But why? Why didn't I take the rook? That's so obvious. They just gave it to me. I don't even need to click from the next move to know that it was a blunder, but you can watch the lines change here. Yeah. Okay. See, it was at zeros. They moved their bishop away, which undefends their rook, but I didn't take it, so it's back to zeros again. So, yeah. Watch right here when I turn on the lines, it's going to say that my only move that maintains that huge advantage was taking the rook. Okay, well, I knew that one. I saw that even before the lines changed. Okay, well, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so that last one was the last chance that I had in this game, and I had a huge chance because the opponent just gave me their rook, and I just didn't take it. And the rest of the game was a draw. I thought I still had chances, 20 moves back here. I thought I had a chance of forcing my extra pawn down, but it turned out that I didn't. So if we back up quite a ways here, I knew that it was going to be a draw for quite some time. All of these moves I was just repeating here because I had offered my opponent a draw and they didn't accept it, and then I offered another one and they didn't accept it. I normally don't offer draws, but in this case I was pretty sure that there was nothing that anybody could do. Maybe they were just hoping that I would eventually forget about that pawn and just move my bishop somewhere innocuous like this, and then they could promote and my king couldn't catch it or something. But again, way back here in the... Okay, now see, here is a point where I thought I might have a slight advantage, but at no point did I have a slight advantage because there's nothing I can do to keep them from getting in front of this pawn. If I move my king forward, they could check me and force me out of that spot, for one thing. And then if I went even further forward, then they can come get this pawn. But because we have opposite colored bishops, I can't capture that pawn with my bishop. I can't sacrifice my bishop for that pawn. And they can't defend, they can't boot my bishop out from in front of it. So this part here is locked up. If their king ever gets close to that, I can always just move the bishop away. And if they ever advance the pawn, I can sacrifice my bishop for the pawn because I know they can't win with a single bishop. But as long as I have this pawn, I still had a little bit of hope. But as it turns out, no. And once they got in front of it, I realized I can't boot them out from in front of it. So I just got as close as I could. And then they started moving their bishop back and forth. That's right around here is when I realized that it was going to be a draw because they can move this bishop back and forth. I can move my bishop back and forth. And if they ever advance the pawn, I'll just take it. So that's what we did. I brought my king back here just in case that they didn't keep defending the pawn with their bishop, but of course they're going to. And I think it was about here where I offered the draw and they didn't accept. They just took that pawn and then I went after their bishop half-heartedly, but then once I realized they were just going to move it back and forth, then I offered the draw again. And so I protect my bishop here. And again, I just started repeating moves. Nothing that either one of us can do. And so I just repeated moves. They marched their king all the way over there and they marched it all the way back. And I guess still not realizing that it was a forced draw. So we just went here until the computer decided we'd had enough and we had repeated positions 3 times and it automatically drew us on move 89. Okay, so I think what we learned here is that I made a fairly elementary mistake. Yeah, right there. Back on move 36. So almost 50 moves earlier, or maybe more than 50 moves earlier, they gave me their rook and I didn't take it. So that seems like an elementary mistake. I think part of the reason is that a move or two before that, I had failed to take the free pawn and I realized that. So I was focused on it. As soon as they give me a chance, I'll take that free pawn. And I took it. But yeah, I should have taken the rook. I had plenty of time. Both the clocks are visible. You can see that in this 10-minute game, my opponent and I still had more than 6 minutes at this point. So we'd been playing fairly quickly. But yeah, elementary mistake can definitely be corrected. I'm going to get better. Hopefully you guys are getting better too. And we'll all just keep marching up the ratings. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.